Have you ever wondered why the Roman legions were virtually invincible for centuries? Or is there something history never fully revealed? We tend to believe that the secret lies in their discipline, their steel gladius, and brilliant generals like Caesar. But what if I told you the real terror of Rome didn't march on two legs, because hidden in the shadows of their greatest conquests lurks something far more terrifying, more primal, and more bloodthirsty than any legionnaire alive. This weapon knew no fear, it felt no pain, and it needed no orders to tear the enemy apart. We are talking about the war dogs of Rome, living killing machines that turned the battlefield into a nightmare. No enemy could escape. Imagine this for a second, hundreds of massive, armored beasts charging ahead of Rome's iron ranks. Not barking, but roaring like thunder. A sound so terrifying it made entire armies hesitate, their legs trembling before the battle even began. And no, this is not exaggeration for dramatic effect. This was the brutal reality of ancient warfare. The Romans didn't just use dogs. They engineered fear. They created living weapons designed for both physical destruction and psychological collapse. Today, we're going to uncover how these dogs became the tanks of the ancient world, why they were feared more than cavalry, and how Rome mastered a form of warfare so advanced it still echoes today. Sounds crazy. Just wait, because this story has everything: fire, brutality, strategy, and something even darker. From kamikaze fire dogs to elite execution trackers, Rome pushed the limits of war in ways most people can't even imagine. And trust me, after this, you will never look at dogs the same way again. It all started with a breed whose very name sent chills through Rome's enemies, the Molossians. Massive, broad-chested, built like beasts of war. These weren't just dogs. They were monsters with jaws powerful enough to crush bone, and a presence that screamed death before they even moved. Ancestors of modern mastiffs and Rottweilers, but far more aggressive, far more dangerous, and completely stripped of softness. To the Romans, these weren't pets. They were gifts from the gods of war. With thick necks, heavy paws, and eyes that promised destruction, the Romans quickly realized something terrifying. This was not an animal. This was a weapon waiting to be unleashed, and then they perfected it. Eyewitnesses described their bark as something unnatural, like thunder rolling across the battlefield. Imagine standing in the cold fog of Gaul, unable to see, but hearing hundreds of these beasts closing in. That alone was enough to break a man. Before the battle even began, Rome had already won half the war. These dogs weighed nearly as much as a grown man, but moved faster, struck harder, and attacked without hesitation. Modern mastiffs may seem calm and gentle, but their ancestors, they were bred for one thing only: war. The Romans carefully selected the biggest, strongest, most fearless individuals, eliminating weakness at every stage. This wasn't breeding. This was engineering perfection. But what truly made Molossians unstoppable wasn't just their strength, it was their endurance, their loyalty, and their ability to fight through pain. They could march for miles without slowing down, fight through wounds that would stop a human, and most importantly, they never broke. To the Romans, that made them more valuable than soldiers. Because soldiers could hesitate, dogs never did. These animals shared tents with legionnaires, ate beside them, and fought beside them. They weren't tools. They were partners in war. And when a Molossian sensed danger, it didn't just bark. It warned the entire camp, loud enough to wake the dead. Soon, these dogs became symbols of Roman dominance. When enemies saw them, they knew one thing: there would be no mercy, no negotiation, only destruction. But this was just the beginning, because Rome didn't stop at creating powerful animals. They turned them into armored, killing machines. Have you ever seen a dog in full battle armor? For Rome, this was normal. These beasts were fitted with specially designed leather and metal armor, protecting vital areas while allowing full speed and agility. But the most terrifying feature: their collars. Not simple straps, but thick iron rings covered in razor, sharp spikes pointing in every direction. Try grabbing that in a fight, and you'd lose your hand. Try facing it head-on, and you'd be impaled before the dog even bit you. These dogs didn't just attack, they destroyed everything in their path. Roman engineers crafted each piece carefully, balancing protection with mobility. Every detail mattered, because in Rome's eyes, a weapon must survive to kill again. And then they went even further. If armor wasn't enough, Rome added fire. Yes, fire. They created special units of dogs known as pyrophores, carriers of destruction. Dogs equipped with burning payloads strapped to their backs, released directly into enemy cavalry formations. Why? Because horses fear two things above all: predators and fire. Now imagine both charging at full speed. The result: chaos. Horses panicked. Riders lost control. Entire formations collapsed within seconds. One dog could destroy an entire cavalry charge. Brutal, yes. Effective, absolutely. Rome didn't fight fair. Rome fought to win. And if that meant turning animals into weapons of fire, they did it without hesitation. But war dogs weren't just tools of destruction. They were also Rome's eyes, ears, and silent hunters. In forests, mountains, and fog-covered lands where human senses failed, dogs thrived. They could detect enemies long before any scout, move silently, signal danger without a sound, track fugitives across impossible terrain. And once they locked onto a target, there was no escape. You could hide from a soldier, but you could never hide your scent. These dogs hunted down fleeing enemies, deserters, even their own soldiers. If they tried to escape, they didn't kill immediately. They immobilized, held, waited, until Rome arrived. That's why enemies called them something terrifying: shadows of death, because once they were on your trail, it was already over. But here's what makes this even more intense. Rome didn't just use these dogs randomly. They built entire military units around them, organized, structured, controlled. Dogs had handlers, barracks, rations, roles. They were part of the Roman war machine, as important as any soldier. And the psychological effect: unmatched. Imagine standing on a battlefield, watching hundreds of armored beasts charging toward you, fearless, unstoppable. Unstoppable even when wounded. That's not just war. That's terror. Many enemies believed Rome had summoned demons. And honestly, it looked like it. But despite all this brutality, there was something unexpected: respect. The Romans honored their war dogs. They built monuments, wrote epitaphs, rewarded loyalty, because to a legionnaire, his dog was the only companion who would never betray him. Never run, never turn, only fight until the very end. And that bond, that loyalty, it's something we still see today. But back then it built an empire. The story of Roman war dogs isn't just about animals. It's about power, control, and how far humans are willing to go to dominate the world. Rome didn't just build roads and laws. It built fear, and sometimes that fear had teeth. And just when you think you've seen everything Rome was capable of, it gets even darker, because what you've heard so far, that was just the surface. The real nightmare began when Rome stopped using dogs as soldiers and started turning them into psychological weapons of domination. Imagine this: a battlefield after the clash is over. The screams have faded. The dust is settling. Survivors, if any, are trying to crawl away, hiding in forests, rivers, broken terrain. They think they've escaped. They think it's over. But that's exactly when Rome sends in the hunters. Not men. Dogs. Silent, focused, relentless. These weren't the same beasts that charged into battle with armor and fire. No, these were something far more terrifying, because these dogs didn't attack blindly. They hunted, step by step, breath by breath, tracking scent trails that no human eye could ever detect. You could run for hours, bleed into the mud, hide underwater, climb rocks. It didn't matter, because once a Roman war dog locked onto your scent, you were already marked. And here's the most chilling part. They didn't bark. They didn't warn you. They just appeared, out of nowhere, like death itself. One moment silence, the next teeth, clamped onto your leg, your arm, your throat, dragging you back not to kill immediately, but to deliver you alive, broken, helpless. A message to everyone else: you can run from Rome, but you will never escape it. And this was not random brutality. This was strategy. Rome understood something most armies didn't. Fear spreads faster than any weapon. One man escaping and telling the story of being hunted by beasts that never stopped could terrify an entire region. Villages would surrender without a fight. Armies would hesitate. Leaders would think twice before rebelling, because they knew, if they lost, there would be nowhere to hide. And this is where Rome's true genius reveals itself. They didn't just win battles, they controlled minds. But how did they create such terrifying precision? How did a simple animal become a perfectly controlled weapon? The answer lies in something even more disturbing: the training. Because what you're about to hear feels less like history and more like something out of a horror experiment. Roman dog trainers, known as bestiarii, didn't just teach dogs to attack. They rewired their instincts. From the moment they were puppies, these dogs were exposed to chaos, the sounds of swords clashing, men screaming, metal hitting metal, fire, blood, fear, over and over again, until something changed inside them, until the noise no longer meant danger, but action. They were trained to associate violence with purpose, pain with progress, and hesitation was eliminated completely. Weak dogs were removed early. Only the most aggressive, the most focused, the most fearless survived the process. This wasn't training. This was selection at its most brutal level. And then came the attack conditioning. Dogs were taught to aim for specific points: the throat, the groin, the tendons. Not random bites, precise strikes, designed to end a fight in seconds. Mannequins soaked in scent, stuffed with rewards, used again and again until the dog learned one thing: grip, and never let go. Imagine facing an enemy like that. An enemy that doesn't get tired, doesn't hesitate, doesn't feel fear. An enemy that only knows one command: destroy. And just when you think that level of control is impossible, Rome adds another layer. Discipline, because these dogs weren't wild. They didn't attack randomly. They attacked on command, stopped on command, moved in formation, worked in coordination. Multiple dogs surrounding a single target, cutting off escape, striking from different angles, like a pack of wolves, but controlled by human strategy. This wasn't chaos. This was calculated violence. And this is exactly why no one could replicate Rome's success. Other tribes tried using dogs, but they failed, because they had strength, but not system. Rome had both, and that made all the difference. But here's something even more unexpected, something most people don't realize. These dogs weren't just feared. They were respected, deeply, because for Roman soldiers, these animals weren't just tools. They were brothers in war. Think about it. In a world full of betrayal, politics, and shifting loyalties, a dog was the only companion who never turned, never lied, never abandoned you. And in battle, that kind of loyalty meant everything. There are recorded stories of dogs shielding their wounded masters, standing over them, refusing to move, even when surrounded by enemies, fighting until their last breath. Not because they were ordered to, but because they chose to. And that kind of bond, it changes everything, because suddenly, this isn't just about war anymore. It's about connection, about trust, about a silent understanding between man and beast built in the middle of chaos. And Rome knew the power of that. That's why they honored their dogs. Graves, inscriptions, stories passed down for generations, names remembered, because in the end, these weren't just weapons. They were legends. But even legends had another role to play. Because when there was no war, Rome didn't let them rest. Instead, they sent them somewhere even more brutal: the arena, the Colosseum, a place where death was entertainment, where survival meant glory and failure meant nothing. Here war dogs faced something even more dangerous than soldiers: wild beasts, lions, bears, leopards, creatures that lived only to kill. And yet, the dogs fought them, and sometimes they won. Crowds of thousands watched as these beasts clashed, not just as a show, but as proof that Rome's creations were stronger than nature itself. Every fight was a test,